And we communicate a lot, not only when we say things, but also when people look at us. What is our appearance? Do we look like we just survived the crash from the plane, or do we look like we're arranged and prepared to handle that situation, whatever that situation is?
Welcome to a new season of Leadership Live podcast, where talented people become extraordinary leaders. I'm Daphne Horowitz, and I'm here to help you cut through the noise and talk about real leadership issues. Down to earth, solid, caring and confident leadership. No theory, no pie in the sky, no frills or fluff. Because this is what the world needs most right now. For you to lead with confidence, clarity and impact, so that you can build a business that builds people, grows profit, and makes a difference. Do you trust your manager? What do you do if you disagree with their instructions? There are always moments when we question some decisions that are made by our managers, and we need to think about how we're going to handle it. Do you say something? Do you insist? Or do you just let it go and trust that your leader will do the right thing? This is one of the questions that we explore with our guests today. I am so excited about the conversation with my guests, Emil Dobrovolschi and Octavian Pantis. Emil is a pilot with the Romanian airline Tarom for the last 20 years, and he takes us behind the scenes into the cockpit of his aeroplane with all the rich stories that come with it to understand what it means to lead a flight crew. Octavian is a leadership consultant, and he helps us understand how these lessons in flight can help leaders on the ground to lead powerfully and effectively. In our conversation, we delved into key topics in leadership, such as how to handle conflicts and disagreements, what it means to have a dark cockpit, which, even though it sounds ominous, actually means that everything is A-OK, and what are the essentials of communication, which we know is a super important topic, whether you're leading a team in the air or in a business on the ground. Emil and Octavian wrote a book called Dark Cockpit, a fascinating look at leadership from a pilot's point of view. So tune in and enjoy this wonderful, rich, fascinating conversation. And as always, for great leadership resources and information about our events and programs, head on to my website at daphnaHorowitz.com and grab yourself a copy of my book, Weekly Habits for Extraordinary Leaders, on Amazon today. And if you are ready to take that step further and build your habits to be a confident and inspiring CEO with a top-performing team, then check out our CEO Habits Bootcamp, where we really identify your unique habit pathway to make you that confident CEO with all those great communication skills and conflict resolution skills and all the different areas that a CEO really needs to be competent in. So that's at daphnaHorowitz.com/CEO Bootcamp. Go have a look there and get more information. And while you're at it, please do share a review on the podcast platform, share the episode with a friend if you've enjoyed it, and I always thank you for your support. Welcome, we've got Octavian and Emil. I'm really excited to have you on the show today. Emil is a pilot and full of stories about how you can learn valuable lessons from being a pilot of an airplane for piloting a business, a team, leading a team, and getting the results that you want. Before we dive in, I want to mention the book that you've written together, Emil and Octavian. It's called Dark Cockpit, How to Communicate, Lead, and Be in Control at All Times Like an Airline Captain, which I think there's lots of immense lessons to learn. And I know that I did research what is Dark Cockpit before we came onto the call, just to understand. And actually what it means is, it means that everything is going well. There's no lights, we don't need any other resources, everything's fine, everything's going well exactly as planned, which is interesting for me that Dark Cockpit is used to say everything's good. So yeah. I want to dive in with a story. Emil, tell us a story from piloting an airline, piloting an airplane, where you really, showed some key leadership lessons and insights in the story. I know you've got lots, so you tell us which one you want to lead with.
Thank you very much for the invitation first. Yeah, I'm glad to be in your show. I'm flying for Romanian national carrier Tarom for the last 20 years or so. And for the last 20 years, I've been an instructor and a tie-breaking examiner with them. So I have an experience not just like as a captain, but also as a instructor. So I want to refer only to be in control like an airline captain, because this can be misleading. Some people will think that as a leader, you have to be in control all the time. And this means that you have to be a big person looking down on people and expressing your leadership as a big boss. Actually, it's not. To be a leader in aviation means to be a little bit humble, to respect your team, to listen to them, to use them for what are they trained to do. So if I have to think to a real story, I refer to one of the stories in the book with one of my friends. He was a captain that time, and he had a co-pilot flying for a winter departure from Bucharest, and all the aircraft were de-icing the aircraft. But this captain decided not to. So in the cockpit, there was this discussion between them, what to do. The captain was trying to express his authority, saying, no, my decision, I'm the captain, decision is not to de-ice the aircraft. And the co-pilot was sure, reading in the book, that the signs said that they have to de-ice the aircraft. And by all means, all the other aircraft were de-icing. But this captain was very sure. He said, look, I'm very experienced. I know when I have to de-ice my aircraft. This is not that time. So let's go. And the co-pilot...
Can I just jump in there? Because I was fascinated by that. Why did the captain decide so clearly that he did not want to de-ice? Was it a time thing, that it would take a bit longer? Would it delay the flight? What actually was the key thing there?
So when you de-ice the aircraft, first of all, there's a contamination on the surface of the airplane, or on the fuselage, on the wings, or the surface, or the control surfaces. And this time they were at the limit. The temperature were at the limit again. So I wasn't there. But the concern of the first officer was that, look, we are exactly at the edge. The temperature is exactly at the edge. The deposit of contamination of the wings are, maybe I consider them necessary to be removed. But the captain, he said, no, it's not necessary. And that moment they had an argument. The first officer was experienced too. He said, look, I don't know exactly if, in my opinion, we have to de-ice, but look at the other aircraft, they have to they're de-icing. So why not? We're not doing it. And the captain said, no, it's too expensive. On my authority, we'll not de-ice the aircraft. At the end, they called dispatch. And dispatch, of course, they said, look, de-ice the aircraft, and that's it. Now imagine the cockpit, how it was with that captain, with that first officer. They didn't start the fly yet, and they were in the tension was very high.
Yeah, and I can imagine that this is something that happens. Your manager, your leader, your CEO says you have to do things one way, and the direct report says, hold on a sec, I have a different view and I have a different opinion here. And it's very courageous, correct. I would imagine, for the first officer to actually speak up and then take it to the who did he take it to? Who decided
dispatch.
The dispatch, yeah.
To dispatch, the operations.
Yeah.
Now imagine, but what is more interesting is that I talked with both of them on their way back. So they came back home, and I asked them, I said, tell me, what's going on? What happened that cockpit? What will happen if the next flight you have a challenge from your first officer again? What you will change? Will you change something? Would you change something if next time the same you have a challenge from the first officer? But the most interesting discussion was with the first officer, because he liked me as a professional. We went through some flights, difficult flights together, or simulator sessions together. So I asked him, I said, look, if I were the captain and saying the same situation, I will say, no, it's not necessary to de-ice the aircraft. What would you do? So he was very puzzled. He said, yeah, at the end, I will accept your decision. I said, why? He said, because I trust you. So it's not about the fact. It's about do you trust the captain or not?
Yeah.
And I asked him again, but guess what I will do if you would say, let's de-ice the aircraft? He said, I don't know. I said, I will de-ice the aircraft immediately. If one of us in that cockpit, we have doubts about to de-ice or not, I will prefer to de-ice the aircraft, to be late 5 minutes maybe, or 10 minutes more. But I will de-ice the aircraft, and both the team will leave together, confident that we did the right thing together. And even then the lower part of the cockpit, the co-pilot will have these doubts. The captain is trained and he's entitled to take care of the feedback of the first officer, to express the feedback, to express the doubt in a proper way.
Yeah, I think I loved the questions, the two questions that you posed to the first officer, because the first one said, okay, what if you were working with me as a team? And he said, no, I would trust you. And that's interesting for me because trust is so critical. There was obviously something in there that he didn't trust him in that moment and his decision. So he felt that he had to speak up. And then the second question which was, what if you were my first officer telling me to de-ice the plane, what would I do? And then again, it's a question of listening as a leader, listening, taking in the information that you're being given, and then with the trust that you have in your team to say, hold on a sec, maybe I could be wrong. Maybe we do take this extra step. Such a powerful, powerful story.
If I may add,
yes, I was going to invite you. Yeah.
So for me as a consultant, it was fascinating to discover these behind-the-scenes stories from aviation. For years now, I've met Emil in 2008, and 3 years ago I said, "Hey, you should write a book because there's so much learning here for people, not only for people who pilot planes, but for people who pilot a team, for instance, or a project or a professional life." And in this particular example, what we see is that the consequence of a decision is not only frosting or defrosting in the airline, or in business, the manager says, let's spend $100 on this, and someone in his team or her team says, no, let's not. So the consequence is not that we spend or we don't spend the money. The consequence is also how people feel in that team, right? And as a consultant, we work with international leadership teams, and often a subject that comes up is retention. How can we retain or keep people? It's hard to find them, and we have to keep them. And too often the discussion goes too quickly into the money. They want more money, and if we don't pay them enough, they will leave. And they have. But here we have an example of a situation where you have the boss, and you have a qualified, experienced person in the team who is now feeling bad, right? Not because he's not paid better, not because he will not get some kind of bonus, but just, hey, my value, my opinion, my experience is worth zero in his team, right? And in their cockpit, there are tents throughout the flight now. In business, that would mean that we had a tough call this morning. You decided your way. I just have to live with it now. And of course, I will not leave the company because of that. But this adds a little more to my dissatisfaction here, instead of this discussion adding a little more to my trust and to my well-being here in the company. So the message for our viewers who are leaders in the team, worry not only about, are we going to spend that $100 or not, or what are we going to spend on, but how do people feel, especially because when it's obvious for everybody that we must cut a cost. Of course, we'll cut a cost, and nobody will say no unless they're being unrealistic. But when it's on the edge, if you can allow it, leave it to them. Let them be happy. Let them be the hero of the day. Let them go home or in the other room to their family and, hey, I had a great day at the office today. It was a tough call, but boss he said or she said, yeah, we'll do it like you said. And they will be even more responsible afterwards. And they will feel like they have wings. And that's the main learning probably of the story.
And I think it's a great question for leaders to ask themselves is the action I'm about to take going to build trust or destroy trust? Because at the end of it, when you're facing difficult decisions and you're facing challenges, it's the trust that the team has in each other that is going to get you through. I'm interrupting this episode to share an absolutely wonderful free training and leadership toolkit my team and I have created, and we want you to just go and get it. So if you're a CEO and you're really good at what you do, but you're frustrated because you're constantly chasing deliverables or putting out fires, and you know that you can be doing even better and getting better results by building leadership habits to become confident, inspiring with a top performing team, then go and grab your free leadership toolkit and training at daphnahorovitz.com/leadership toolkit. It's just a matter of creating leadership habits that serve you, your business, and your team to drive the results you want to see. I will show you how in this free training, so go and get it at daphnahorovitz.com/leadership toolkit. And if you're ready to delve even deeper and find out about our CEO Habits Bootcamp launching in October, head on to daphnahorovitz.com/CEO Bootcamp. I can't wait to see what this will do for you and your leadership and business results. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, and the hidden lesson is that it's a little bit, it's hidden because some leaders, they will not understand it from the beginning. If you trust your people and if you give them wings, if you accept their feedback, so when you're in mistake or when something happens, if you listen to them, this will help you build a better project.
Right.
My project is the flight from A to B with passengers in a safely mode,
right,
in time and comfortable. So if I allow my co-pilot or my team to give me feedback, or if I listen to them, the project itself, the flight itself will be better. Every flight, I'm flying mostly with first officer under supervision, being an instructor. So I'm in my seat, flying with a new guy, he or she at the beginning of their career. And every time, of course, I have 16,000 hours and I spend 6,000 hours in simulator or more. But I know what to do in almost all situations. But every time, if I have, let's say, I have to avoid some clouds, so cumulonimbus, thunderstorm clouds, and I have to avoid them. I have my weather radar. I will never try to avoid it by myself because I know better. I will always ask him, what do you think? Or
yes, what do you think? Oh my gosh,
exactly. What do you think about?
And
if they have a better idea, I will immediately embrace it. I said, wow, it's better like this. Yeah, I will do your way. And I will tell the next day to everybody, look, yesterday I went in a flight and this young co-pilot, she or he told me that it's better to the north because this and this, and I follow it and it was better. Yeah. And I give wings to my colleagues like this. Right. But the end, my project, my flight is better because I have the inputs and I have the support of them.
Yeah, I love what you're saying because I find, and I often say this to the leaders that I work with, is to use that question, what do you think? It doesn't show that you don't know or that you're weak as a leader. It actually empowers your team and it actually gives you more information. So that question, I love it. What do you think? Actually gives your team wings. So Emil, I actually want to ask you something else because you alluded to it in terms of every time you fly, you have a new team and you have a new project and a new mission. And we've talked about building trust. So I'm really curious, how do you build trust? I would imagine you have to build trust very quickly with a new team every time you take on a new flight. How do you do this? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a very good question because a captain or commander stands in front of his team every day, a different team. And in my company, maybe we are just a few hundreds and we know all each other. So maybe we can fly to the same crew once per month. But in bigger companies with 10, 15, 20,000 pilots, of course, they will never fly together for a year. They have to build trust in an instant. And this will start with the presence of the commander. I will give you my example. I'm the first in the briefing room. So I'll be 10, 15 minutes or more there first to get familiar with the flight file. I know the weather. I know if we have dangerous goods. I know if I have special needs, special passenger with special needs. I know all of that before the crew comes in front of me. Imagine, of course, they will respect my grades. They will see I have 4 stripes. Yes, I'm a captain. But imagine me arriving late. Okay, where are you going? To Tel Aviv? No, to New York. Okay, to New York today. How's the weather? Let me check here. Yes. How many passengers? Where is the aircraft? things like this will destroy the trust, will not enforce it. And I will address, my briefing is for everybody. Because look, in my team, nobody is in plus. Nobody's there coming just to see the view. So if I have a seat occupied by a cabin crew in the front or in the back of my aircraft, or if I have one or two cockpit occupants with me in the cockpit, that means that is their place there. So they have a role in my aircraft, and I will make sure that I will let them know what's their role in the aircraft in a friendly atmosphere, because they have to know why they woke up at 4 a.m. today to go with me. What is my project? What is our project? Because sometimes people forget this. They will come flight after day after day, years for years, and they will forget what's their purpose. Yeah. They will just come for, I don't know, maybe for money. They will come because they have nothing else to do. I don't know. But when they fly with me, we have the same project together, my flight. So we have to do it the proper way. How? Everybody knows their role. In case of an emergency or something wrong happens, everybody will do their part. I will let them do their part. I will not tell them what to do, because if they are trained in their positions, they are trained to do their thing. They will let me make a step back to have a better overview of my cockpit, to build my decision, and of course they'll be more responsible, because this project is also theirs. And so if they do their part, ownership, responsibly, they will raise their responsive message for what is going on.
Yeah, and Octavian, I'm sure you can also relate to there's huge leadership lessons here in terms of, first of all, everybody knowing their role, preparation and a proper briefing by the leader, and then knowing the purpose of the trip, the purpose of the mission. Why are you here? It's not enough to just come for the paycheck. Yeah. What can you add? Yeah.
The reality is that everyone who's a leader, they have two hats. One is obviously the specialist hat. In Emil's case, they have to be a good pilot of the plane, right? They have to be knowledgeable about. If you don't have that, it's hard to lead anybody. In some other cases, it would be, I'm an IT specialist, I'm a marketing, I'm a finance. But you also have the second hat, the hat of the leader. And how much time you spend with each hat on tells a lot about what kind of a leader you are. Yeah. And unfortunately, many specialists are being promoted to leaders, but they forget their second hat. They still wear the specialist hat on, and they feel that like they're better pilot or IT or finance or legal advisor, and they try to be in the front of the stage all the time and focus and forget to focus on growing the other ones. Yeah. So a leader's role is really to grow the other, because if the more you grow them, the better the results of the team will be. If you take a classical example, let's say you're leading a sales team of 10 people and you have to sell 100. When you were in that team, you sold 9 or 10 or 11 units per year, let's say. Now, and let's say you're very good. No matter how good you are by yourself, you cannot sell 100. So there's no point even in trying. What you can do is help each of those 9, 10 people you have in your team to sell 11 or 12 or 13 each. If you know what to do, how to treat them, how to give them feedback, and when to play a specialist role with them, and then the team result will be 100, 120, 130. Of course, it's not easy. And of course, the temptation is, especially when it's crisis, the temptation for all of us is to do what we're comfortable with, right? Mm-hmm. The kid, if it's an unknown place, will run to his mother. Why? Because his mother is that place of comfort. I don't want to, it's dark, it's noisy, I go to mommy. What does the leader do? Well, I was promoted because I was a good specialist. So I resort to my specialist hat. Yeah. But really, that's not the right thing to do, because then you will send everybody else for coffee and they will not play specialist because you are. Exactly. So the right thing to do is, even in times of crisis, reach out to the specialists in them and help them grow. Because if they grow, you grow too as a leader, and the value that you bring as a team goes up. So,
I actually want to just jump in there for a minute, because that's exactly what I call the leadership gap. And there's two of them that you identified. One is that gap between expert or specialist and leader. And the second is the gap between you and your team. And if you really want to close that gap, you need to do whatever you can as a leader to bring them up to that level where they are using their specialty and expertise in order to gain experience and knowledge and wisdom. And I want to touch on what you said, which is especially in a time of crisis. And I know you have a great example from aviation, and Octavian, you will take us into the leadership side. But Emil, tell us, what does a pilot do in times of crisis? I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I was exactly what I had in mind listening to Octavian, because there's an unwanted scenario, an emergency scenario. We repeat and exercise and practice. For each pilot goes for a 4-hour session, a training session in a full flight simulator every 6 months. And then the next day he's checked for 4 hours in the same full flight simulator. Every session, each pilot is tested for emergency situation. So one of the worst is the emergency evacuation. Imagine taking off with a 164 tons aircraft and you hit something on the runway, a car, or maybe one of the engines goes on fire and there's a huge bomb, and then the aircraft stops.
Crazy.
Imagine to
very
stop.
Scary to think about that.
It's a very scary, scary scenario.
Scary.
And unwanted. Maybe it's dark. Maybe the smoke comes into the aircraft. Everybody's yelling, concerned about to get out. The pilots in the cockpit, they have to go through an emergency drill. Now, the question is what the captain does in that moment. And the answer is nothing. He's pulling his chair back. So physically, he's away from the cockpit to have a better overview. And the trained co-pilot, he's trained without confirmation. Is the first time when the first officer does all the actions without the confirmation of the other pilot, of the captain.
Wow.
So
he's operating alone, and the pilot is silent.
The pilot is
takes a step back, takes a step back, and lets everybody else. Wow.
To have a better overview and thinks, good.
So he's the thought coordinator.
Which way is the wind coming from? Is the engine on fire on that side? How much fuel do I have on that wing? Maybe I have 50 tons of fuel.
Wow.
Do I have any dangerous goods in the cargo hold?
Wow.
Where I'm stopped? What intersection? Which is the better way to run away from the aircraft? Am I explode?
Emil, it's perspective. It's to give the captain perspective to step
the captain
back
is
while
building,
everybody's running around. He can actually assimilate what is going on and look
everybody's
bigger. Wow,
everybody's busy.
Awesome.
The flight attendants they're
running around. They're running around like crazy.
No, they're not running. They're looking at in the cockpit, in the passenger cabin, to identify where is the best way to get out of the aircraft. Okay. And it is I have to pay respect for the flight attendants. They are some of them, for each emergency situation, they found some flight attendants dropped dead in front of the emergency exit because they are not running around. Okay. If they would run, it's a human thing. Yeah. They were afraid inside. It's 100 degrees of Celsius, smoke. So if they open the emergency exit, it's humanly to run, but they're not, because they saw the elderly lady in the fifth row. They saw the couple in the fifth row. The children, and they want to get everybody out.
It's very planned. Exactly. Everybody knows what their role is in an emergency situation.
Correct. And the captain is building its decision. Why? Because he has to take everything into account, and then to order the evacuation, to report to the tower that they are evacuating, to take his hat, the sign of power, and to run out and say, after me, because his role, it didn't end when everybody's out of the aircraft, because people were running scarily like this on the tarmac, and there will be emergency teams coming, the fire brigade is coming with 100 kilometers per hour on the runway. So the passengers have to be protected. So everybody runs after the captain on a secure area. So this is how an emergency is done. How you delegate to each person on your crew, to each crew member, co-pilot and cabin crew, to do their role.
Now, by contrast, Daphne,
exactly.
in business,
what happens in business, right? The running around that I said, that's my immediate picture. Everybody's running around trying to do something,
yes,
you know?
Everybody's running. And who is the busiest in the room? It's the boss usually, right? Or the entrepreneur. Or They are the busiest. They are in all calls. They're thinking, they're making phone calls to everybody, rather than, and I hope you remember this expression, which you don't hear too often, to build a decision, right? In English, we say you make a decision, in other way, but you build a decision. What does it mean? It means I take time Yeah, but you don't have time. Yes, you do. If everybody else is doing what they are trained to do, then you don't need 1 hour. You need a few moments in those minutes to take into account all that and build that into the best possible decision. Right. What does it mean for an entrepreneur? If it's a crisis, don't schedule all day long calls, one from 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 11:30, but schedule maybe a block of 1 hour. Let's schedule that just for you, meeting with yourself. No phone calls, no emails, no calls to attend to present, but just not for a nap, but to reflect a little bit on what's going on. Because otherwise,
it's thinking exactly. Time, it's planning time, it's strategizing time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Otherwise, when do you do that? Many managers try to do that so they've had calls all day long, and then in the evening, maybe they're with their kids. They are trying to think, and kids want to play and say, "Daddy, daddy, mommy, mommy," and maybe they shout at their kids who are the ones they love most and deserve this treatment the least. But it's because they never had the time during the day or the week to reflect on the level. So you have to make time, because if you don't, but of course now managers say, but my team are not qualified enough. Well, of course they're not. If I treated them like there were almost nobodies throughout the year, it's no surprise that now they're not equipped. But if I start somewhere, then at least at the next crisis, they will be then better equipped and will be able to navigate better through it. So it's like saying, I can't save money. Yeah, but you spend money. Yeah, but I have to spend because I cannot save. Well, save a little, save $10, save $100, save something, because if you don't start, you're never going to have something put aside. The same it is with leader. Make some time for helping others grow. Make some time for you to reflect on what's going on. You have to. That people say, should leaders be an example? It's not whether or not they should be or not. They are an example.
Exactly. They are.
People look at the leader in a call. If there's bad news coming, they look at your reaction and they see, are you able to remain calm and suggest something reasonable, or do you start shouting, or you video on or video off or and mute and whatever? They look at you. And they take cues.
They are looking at you all the time. Exactly. You are an example. It's not about planning to be. You are watched.
Whether you like it or not, the second you accepted the role of a leader, you are an example. How you look, how you dress. The first section of the book is about communication. And we communicate a lot, not only when we say things, but also when people look at us. What is our appearance? Do we look like we just survived the crash from the plane? Or do we look like we're arranged and prepared to handle that situation, whatever that situation is?
And I do want to touch on that, because I think communication is key, and this is something that I also often talk about, is communication. How do we communicate? Sure. I think in a time of crisis, everyone's looking to you to give direction, give guidance, and I do think communication is absolutely critical in that point of time, even when you don't have all the answers or you don't know exactly what's going on. So I would love to just maybe, as we reach the end of our time together, what are some tips we can take from the aviation examples and stories in terms of communication?
First of all, for us, communication is vital.
Yeah.
I know that everywhere, in your family, in your professional life, when something goes wrong, there is this excuse, we didn't communicate well, or well enough, or we didn't communicate at all, or the communication was bad, things like this. But in aviation, we have a word saying that aviation history was written in blood. So every time when an accident or incident happens, there will be an investigation. And in the past, most of the mishaps happened because of the miscommunications. And nowadays, we have a standard operation procedure comprising standard calls and task sharing and procedures and so forth. But the most important part, the one that triggers everything, it's the communication. The first thing to start an action, it's a communication. So we have, of course, when we have to communicate one thing or another, or deviation when we have to immediately give the feedback to the other pilot, speed, altitude, or other things which are to be checked and corrected immediately. But there are so many things that happen in an aircraft, in a cockpit, that it's impossible to cover all the situation with standard calls. And imagine this, the pilots are sitting in a dark environment, looking forward, they're not seeing each other, to validate the message, and they have headsets on their ears. There is a crisscross of communication in it, and there is a strong noise maybe between air traffic controllers, other aircraft, between aircraft, intercom. So it's difficult to pass the message in a short or limited time and to be the right one, to trigger attention. And just an example, in aviation, the communication is impersonal. If I'm flying with the youngest co-pilot and he's the pilot flying, and my role would be to pilot monitor. If he says landing gear down, and because I'm worried or I'm concentrated, my attention is distributed in other places. If he raises his voice or she raises his voice saying landing gear down, secondly, I will never think for a moment that it was personal. So he realized or she realized I was not paying attention enough, and with a bigger voice, louder, they will tell me again the same message. I will thank him. Or if my co-pilot says speed, that means that I am not keeping the speed I said I will keep. It's plus 10 or minus 5, the speed I said. This is a feedback. He said speed. Not for a moment I think that this young co-pilot thinks about me that I'm stupid. Stupid, come on, speed, you're not keeping the speed. It's impersonal. I will do immediately. I will realize immediately. I said, okay, correcting, and do the actions to correct.
Emil, that you are saying something so important here, because we take things personally, and I guess that's also part of your training, right? That you know not to, because there is a protocol about communication, which we don't have in the leadership organizational space. So that's really fascinating, because such an important thing is not to take things personally, to know that you're dealing with the facts of a situation and to really listen to each other so that you can take feedback from each other. And I guess that also comes back to trust, you know. So Octavian, maybe you can.
Yeah, one of the things that is fascinating about communication in aviation is that one is it's not taken personally. So it's not, I don't take it as an attack that you repeat. No, it means.
Which is again the exact opposite of what we see in our organizational space, right? Because all the problems stem from taking things too personally.
Yeah, if we're in a business call and somebody points out something to me, I will immediately feel attacked. Maybe, hey, why are you saying this in public? Why are you saying it again? When is that report going to be ready, Octavian? Where we need it now? Why did you have to say that in public? No, don't worry about that. They were just asking, maybe you promised to have it by Wednesday. It's Thursday already. The report is nowhere to be found. So they want to know where the report is. That's number one. Number two is that for every message, there's a response. So communication is not over when you place your message out there. The communication is over when you are sure that the other person has received it and will do something about it. Imagine the following example. The tower saying to the, let's say they're approaching landing at Heathrow or somewhere, and maybe they say maintain heading 270. Now, imagine if you watch a movie or the tower says maintain heading 270 and the cockpit says nothing back, right? We would immediately think, oh, something's wrong, right?
Yes.
But in business, somebody sends something and we don't reply, right? Or the reply is dry. So maintain heading 270, okay. In aviation, there's no okay as a response, because what does okay mean? Okay means you heard us, but you will not do as we say. Okay means you've heard us and you will do as we say. There's no okay. But in email, somebody worked on the report for 3 or 4 hours. They send it to us. Here's the report. And I just say, okay, got it. Thank you. That's nothing. It will kill initiative. It will kill trust. The best, give a more specific feedback, saying something along the lines of, thank you very much. I like the detail you put in, especially at section 3. That's so good. Thank you very much. So make sure that the person knows that you have received the message, that you're happy, and that you'll do as you say. In aviation, if I agree with Emil that we'll meet tomorrow at 3, he never responds, okay. He always says, okay, tomorrow at 3.
Yeah, at this place. I love it because actually what you're saying is, or what I'm getting from this, is there is no emails on aviation. There are no emails on board a plane, right? It's
there's no email. It's voice.
Verbal, speaking communication, where you speak and you confirm and you know what the next step is. There's a very clear protocol for communication, and it's all done by speaking, which I think is really, really powerful, because I also think that a lot of conflict can be averted if we speak to a person rather than put what we think on an email. That's really fascinating.
So what can our viewers or listeners take from this particular moment? Set your own rules in the team. If you're unhappy that you keep sending emails and there's no response, next time say, hey, we need responses, just to know that the email reached you, just to know that you've got the email. So agree on something that does not take too much time, but on something that avoids confusion and that clarifies that there will be some action. Because the worst you can do is I delegate something, I need the report by Wednesday, and Wednesday comes, I'm angry now because the report is here, and it turns out that the email got into his or her junk email account and never got back. It wouldn't have been nice for me to get a response, but since so set your own, at least some minimal guidance.
I love that. So I have an exercise that I do with teams called building a user manual, where every member of the team builds their own user manual, and we look at things like communication and what do we need and what am I working on and what accountability can we have for each other, and then we sit as a team and we share the user manuals and we create a manual for the team in which they can kind of a rules of engagement type of thing. How can we engage better so that we can work more effectively? Well, Emil and Octavian, it's been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate your time and your sharing your stories. Before we sign off, what is perhaps from each of you a message that you would like to leave our listeners with for today?
I just want to say what is Dark Cockpit means, and we choose this title for our book because
I wanted to ask actually. Thanks.
It's not negative; it's a positive thing. Means that all the lights that are caution, warning, extra consumption, or different systems set to off, they are not lit. So the aircraft, the controls are only environmental lighting. So because otherwise, as soon as you see a light on your overhead panel, you realize what is it. It's an amber light. It's a caution. It's like in your personal life or professional life, you have a partner who's not working well or a client who's not happy. You know about it. You don't have to address it immediately. For us in the cockpit, we don't address each caution immediately, but you have 2 or 3 lights like this. Of course, it's a different scenario. Or if you have a red light, which is a warning means a fire. It's a continuous repetitive chime going bang, 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 bang. You have to address it immediately.
Right.
But in
so
a dark
when the
cockpit
is dark, you actually can see all the warning lights that can
immediately.
You much
You can
more
manage the situation. Yeah, that means that you follow all the procedure, you communicate well. That means that you are in control. And what I want for your listener or the audience who sees us now is to build their projects, to run their projects in Dark Cockpit. And Dark Cockpit will become like a meme, like, I don't know, Black Swan. I hope it will become one day.
Lovely. I love it. Thank you. Run the project as a dark cockpit so you can be aware of every nuance that comes up that's a little bit out of place. Awesome. And Octavian, what is your
you've heard in the last half an hour or so a lot about pilots being in simulators and preparing for this and preparing for that. We should do that outside the aviation too. And that's not a cost. That's not a waste of time. That's one of the best investments we could do, because when the unfortunate happens, you'll be prepared. And even if the unfortunate does not happen in that scenario, it feels good to know that you're prepared. It feels good to know that everybody in your team is well equipped. You can't place a price on that. And it's life is much more beautiful to live if you know that what's up, because there's always things that are not up to you, right? But at least what's up to you, what you could have prevented, what you could have prepared for, do that, and life will be more fun.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you. Maybe just very quickly tell us how people can reach you and tell us where people can buy your book, because of course everyone should go and buy the book, and we'll put it in the show notes as well for sure, but just tell us, give us the info.
So you find the book on Amazon, Dark Cockpit. You find it, you can get it as a Kindle version or paperback version, and you'll find it on different other platforms very soon. There's a website of the book called darkcockpitbook.com. And you can also find us on LinkedIn, and we'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions that came up as you were listening to our discussion that Daphna organized with us today, reach out to us and find us on LinkedIn or on Facebook. We'd love to connect. Thank you very much, Daphna.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Emil Dobrovolschi and Octavian Pantis. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
This wraps up another episode of Leadership Live. Thank you for joining us today. And now let's continue the conversation. Do you have any questions, comments, or suggestions? Connect with me on LinkedIn or head on to my website at daphnahorovitz.com, where you can download a free sample of my new book, Weekly Habits for Extraordinary Leaders. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with a friend so that I can continue to reach and support leaders just like you. So tune in next week to Leadership Live, where talented people become extraordinary leaders.